Welcome to Seeking History. We're embarking on a journey today, tracing a path that, well, it blends incredible artistry with some really pivotal historical moments. And we're starting with a fact that might surprise you. The iconic frontman of Queen, Freddie Mercury, he wasn't actually born Freddie Mercury.
Right.
He was born Farrokh Bulsara. And get this, in Stone Town, Zanzibar, which at the time was a British protectorate.
Yeah, quite a start.
His family later moved to Britain, but that move wasn't just, a simple relocation.
Yeah.
It was triggered by a huge event, the Zanzibar Revolution.
And that single detail, it immediately anchors his personal story and, by extension, the story of the band he would eventually lead within this very specific historical and geographical context. It tells you right away that our exploration today isn't just about the music, great as it is, but about this rich tapestry of history, society, culture, all deeply interwoven with Freddie Mercury's life and Queen's incredible journey. There are just so many layers waiting to be uncovered here.
Absolutely. And our exploration today, well, it really aims to reveal those layers. We're going to follow the thread of events, try to understand the forces at play, things like his personal background, early education, global politics, societal shifts, the evolving music industry, and see how they all converge to shape one of the most iconic bands, really, of all time. So let's begin right at the very beginning of Farrokh Bulsara's life.
Okay, let's unpack this. Farrokh Bulsara, the man who would become Freddie Mercury, was born on a Thursday, September 5th, 1946.
Right.
The place was the government hospital in Stone Town, which is, the historic heart of the capital of the Zanzibar archipelago.
And Zanzibar then, as you said, a British protectorate. Different world.
Very different. Yeah. In 1946, it was under British protection. Today, of course, it's an autonomous part of Tanzania.
And his family history, that adds another, fascinating historical dimension to his origins, doesn't it?
It certainly does. His family belonged to the Parsi community. Now, the Parsis, they're a group of Zoroastrians who historically migrated from Persia, modern-day Iran, to India centuries ago. They formed this quite distinct cultural and religious group. And Freddie's connection to this heritage, it was marked quite formally in 1953 while he was still in Zanzibar. He underwent his Navjot initiation ceremony into Zoroastrianism.
Wow. Okay.
Yeah, the ceremony took place at the fire temple there. So it highlights this deeply rooted cultural and religious background as a key part of his early identity.
So he spent his earliest years in Zanzibar, kind of steeped in the specific cultural environment. But then his education took him thousands of miles away and at a really young age.
That's right. His parents, Bomi and Jer Bulsara, they were seeking what they considered a better education for him. So young Farrokh was sent to a British-style boarding school over in India.
India. Okay.
Yeah, St. Peter's Boys' School in Panchgani. It's a hill station in the state of Maharashtra, located about, 380 kilometers south of Bombay, which we now know as Mumbai.
And he was only 8.
Just 8 years old when he started there in 1955. And during the school holidays, he wouldn't go all the way back to Zanzibar. He'd stay with his grandmother and aunt in Bombay.
Yeah.
And it was actually during his time at St. Peter's in Panchgani that he started using the name Freddie. Just a nickname then, but, it stuck with him for the rest of his life.
It's quite a picture, isn't it? This young boy, so far from home, already starting to show this remarkable breadth in his talents.
Absolutely. The details we have, they show he was much more than just, a studious boarder. He displayed notable artistic talent, apparently excelled, particularly in drawing. His teachers recognized this early on. And he was also surprisingly good at sports, maybe surprising for someone who'd later embody rock and roll theatrics. But he was a skilled sprinter, a boxer, played field hockey, table tennis, quite competently.
Wow.
But, it was his innate musical inclination that truly began to surface and really stand out.
So how did that manifest? And did the school encourage it?
Well, the principal at St. Peter's College was, it seems, quite perceptive. They noticed Freddie's clear musical predisposition and actually wrote to his parents.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah, the suggestion was made that for, an increased monthly fee, Freddie could receive additional piano lessons. His parents agreed, recognizing the value in developing this talent.
Smart move.
Definitely. And he applied himself to the piano, reached the 4th grade level, apparently. He also learned to read music, which is a fundamental skill, obviously, and joined the school choir. So this structured musical training was really significant.
And his first band experience was there, too.
His very first band experience happened right there in 1959. They were called the Hectics. just a school band, where Freddie played the piano.
The Hectics, I love it.
Yeah, they played covers of popular artists of the time, people like Cliff Richard and Little Richard at school functions and parties, that sort of thing. So you see, the path towards music, towards performance, it started remarkably early, shaped by his environment and crucially supportive parents.
So his time in India, shaped by this British education and these early musical explorations, it lasted through his adolescence. But then his life took another really dramatic turn that forced him to move again.
It did. He left St. Peter's College in February 1963. Apparently, he didn't pass the entrance exam required to move up to the 10th class.
Wow.
So he continued his education briefly at St. Mary's School in Bombay. After spending most of his teenage years in India, he did return to Zanzibar. However, this homecoming was, well, very short-lived, and it coincided with immense political upheaval.
Right, the revolution.
Exactly. In 1964, because of the escalating violence and instability of the Zanzibar Revolution, Freddie and his family were compelled to leave their home and migrate once again, this time to Great Britain.
Can you maybe describe the historical context of that Zanzibar revolution a bit more? What actually happened?
Sure. The Zanzibar Revolution was essentially a series of events in January 1964 that overthrew the ruling Arab elite. It led to the formation of a new government, one dominated by the island's African majority. Zanzibar had actually gained independence from Britain just a month earlier, but tensions were running really high between ethnic groups, fueled by historical grievances over power, land, you name it.
Right.
The revolution itself was swift and violent. It was characterized by widespread clashes and, unfortunately, attacks against the Arab and South Asian communities. Estimates of civilian deaths vary, but they're generally in the thousands.
Thousands, wow.
Yeah, it was a period of intense political instability and violence, and that directly led to the Bulsara family's decision, like many others at the time, to seek safety and stability somewhere else. Later that year, in October '64, Zanzibar merged with Tanganyika on the mainland to form the United Republic of Tanzania.
So this historical event, a revolution thousands of miles away from, the heart of rock and roll, was the direct catalyst for Freddie Mercury arriving in London.
Precisely. It's a really powerful example of how these huge global historical events can directly shape individual destinies, forcing a family to leave their home and completely alter their path.
So where did the Bulsara family actually settle when they got to the UK?
They settled in Feltham, which is in the county of Middlesex. It's located quite close to Heathrow Airport, southwest of central London. They took up residence at 22 Gladstone Avenue, a completely different environment you can imagine, compared to tropical Zanzibar or bustling Bombay.
Totally different. And how did Freddie, this young man with such a diverse background, how did he navigate this new environment in London?
Well, he enrolled in Isleworth Polytechnic, and he focused his studies on art there. Like many young immigrants and students arriving in London then, he took on part-time jobs to help support himself during those initial years in Britain.
Right.
The sources mention him working as a warehouseman and also, perhaps most famously, as a luggage handler at Heathrow Airport.
It's quite an image, isn't it? The future flamboyant rock star handling bags at Heathrow.
It really is, adds a unique layer to the story. But his focus on art, that continued.
And it paid off, apparently.
Yes, definitely. In the spring of 1966, he achieved impressive results on his art exam at Isleworth Polytechnic, got top marks. This academic success was crucial because it enabled him to gain admission to the prestigious Ealing Art College in London.
Ah, Ealing. That sounds significant.
It was a hugely significant step, both for his artistic development and, as fate would have it, it's where the pieces really started to fall into place for his musical future.
Because Ealing Art College was a bit of a melting pot, wasn't it? Lots of creative people connecting there.
Exactly. While he was studying art and graphic design at Ealing, Freddie moved into a shared flat near Kensington Market, which was this vibrant hub for music, fashion, counterculture at the time.
Right.
And it was here that he encountered Tim Staffel, a fellow student. Now, Tim wasn't just an art student. He was also the singer and bassist for a band called Smile.
Smile. Okay, now we're getting somewhere.
Right. The other members of Smile were a certain Brian May on guitar and Roger Taylor on drums.
So Freddie first knew Brian May and Roger Taylor through their band, Smile.
That's exactly right. Freddie became a dedicated follower of Smile. He'd attend their rehearsals whenever he could. He was clearly captivated by what they were doing. Interestingly, he actively tried to persuade Tim Staffel to let him join the band as a second vocalist. But those attempts weren't successful at the time.
He was persistent, though.
Oh, yeah. His interest and enthusiasm for Smile were really evident. He even offered suggestions, apparently encouraging them to experiment with more elaborate stage presentations and recording techniques ideas that, would later become hallmarks of Queen.
Wow.
And beyond the music world, he also worked alongside Roger Taylor for a bit, running a stall together in Kensington Market. Another little glimpse into their early struggles, just trying to make ends meet in London.
It's fascinating seeing those early connections forming, that shared history. So how did Smile, with Brian and Roger, actually transform into the band Queen, with Freddie at the helm?
Well, Brian May and Roger Taylor had already built this musical partnership, playing together in Smile since about 1968. Before Smile, Brian May had actually formed an earlier group back in '63 called 1984.
Named after the book.
Named after George Orwell's novel, yeah. Then he formed Smile in '68 with Tim Staffel and a keyboardist, Chris Smith, though Smith left relatively early on. Roger Taylor joined Smile after seeing an ad on a college notice board looking for a drummer.
Classic.
Isn't it? The pivotal moment came in 1970 when Tim Staffel decided to leave Smile. The sources indicate this was down to a couple of things. Musical differences, Staffel preferred more soul and R&B, while May and Taylor were leaning towards a heavier hard rock sound, and also probably a growing frustration with the band's lack of commercial success up to that point.
And that departure, that created the opening Freddie had been hoping for.
Precisely. With Staffel gone, Freddie joined Brian May and Roger Taylor in April 1970. And it was Freddie who came up with the new name for the band. He suggested Queen.
Queen, bold choice.
Very bold. His rationale, as quoted, was quite deliberate. It's just a name, but it's very regal, and it sounds splendid. It's a strong name, very universal and immediate. It had a lot of visual potential and was open to all sorts of interpretations.
And he also acknowledged something else.
He did. He added a really significant note about his awareness of potential societal perceptions, saying, quote, "I was certainly aware of the gay connotations, but that was just one face of it."
That acknowledgement of the gay connotations back in 1970, that's quite striking, isn't it?
It really is. It speaks to his awareness of shifting social landscapes and maybe a willingness, even that early on, to choose a name that was potentially provocative, layered in meaning, challenging those traditional rock band images.
That's a really important point about the historical and societal context of that name choice. So they had Freddie, Brian, and Roger together. When did the lineup that, the world would come to know as Queen finally solidify?
The classic four-member lineup was completed in February 1971. That's when John Deacon joined the band on bass guitar.
John Deacon, the final piece.
The final piece. With the core members in place, they started the practical work of becoming a live band. Their very first tour was actually held down in Cornwall, playing smaller local venues. The explicit goal of those early gigs was simply to gain experience, build stage confidence as a unit.
And Freddie's artistic background from Ealing Art College, that also influenced the band's visual identity pretty early on, right?
Absolutely. His graphic design skills were put straight to use. In 1972, Freddie designed the iconic Queen Crest logo. He drew inspiration from the UK's Royal Coat of Arms, which, perfectly complemented the band's regal name. And he cleverly incorporated the zodiac signs of each band member into the design. 2 Leos for John Deacon and Roger Taylor, a Virgo for himself, Freddie, and a Cancer for Brian May. That logo became such an enduring symbol, another visible piece of his artistic legacy intertwined with the band's identity.
So by 1973, they had the name, the logo, the classic lineup, and they were ready to release their first album.
That's correct. Their self-titled debut album, Queen, came out in 1973. The songs on it had been recorded at Trident Studios.
An historical footnote that just before the album's release, Freddie Mercury had actually put out 2 singles under a pseudonym, Larry Lurex.
Larry Lurex,
Seriously. There were cover versions of songs like I Can Hear Music by the Ronettes and Going Back by Dusty Springfield.
Right.
A brief little solo venture that preceded the band's official debut.
That's amazing. So how was that first album and the ones that followed right after received? Were they instant hits?
Well, Queen and their next 2 albums, Queen the Second in '74 and Sheer Heart Attack also in '74, were generally well received by music critics. And this positive critical attention was really crucial in fueling a rapid growth in the group's popularity, even before they achieved massive chart success. The sources highlight that even in these early recordings, you could really hear the foundations of their sound, drawing heavily from progressive rock, hard rock, heavy metal.
And the material points to Freddie having a clear ambition and vision for the band's sound right from the beginning. They emphasize his strong desire to constantly innovate, to pull influences from a really wide spectrum of musical genres. He didn't want to be confined to just one sound. Queen II, released in '74, that marked a significant milestone, as it was the first Queen album to actually chart in the UK. It climbed to number 5.
And it gave them their first taste of chart success with a single, too.
Exactly. The single 7 Seas of Rye, which Freddie Mercury wrote, reached number 10 in the UK singles chart. This was their first genuine hit single, getting their music onto mainstream radio, introducing them to a much wider audience.
Right.
Queen II is also recognized for beginning to define what would become their signature sound. You know, that heavily layered production, the use of multi-tracked vocals for harmonies, long, complex instrumental passages showcasing their technical skill, and lyrics that often touched on fantasy themes.
Like that epic track, The March of the Black Queen.
That's a perfect example. The March of the Black Queen is this 6-minute composition from Queen II. It's notable for its intricate structure and for, well, lacking a traditional repetitive chorus, which was pretty unconventional for the time.
Yeah.
This track really embodies their early experimental and progressive rock leanings. While Queen II had kind of mixed critical reception when it first came out, some early reviewers apparently called it an overproduced monstrosity.
Harsh.
Yeah, but it quickly became a beloved favorite among the band's dedicated fan base. Its artistic merit has definitely endured, and it's recognized today as one of 3 Queen albums included in that influential music reference book, 1001 Albums You Must Hear Before You Die.
Wow. And beyond the studio, their live performances were also becoming increasingly unique and theatrical during this early period.
Absolutely. The band embraced a very theatrical stage presence, heavily influenced by the glam rock movement that was huge in the UK at the time. Freddie especially leaned right into this. The sources mention him wearing elaborate outfits, including Zandra Rhodes-designed tunics at venues like the Rainbow Theatre, and sometimes even changing costumes mid-show. In their early live appearances, he and Brian May often wore these distinct black and white outfits, and they used makeup to enhance the whole visual aspect of their performance. The shows weren't just concerts, they were spectacles, designed to be visually captivating from the get-go.
So they were gaining critical acclaim, growing in popularity thanks to this unique sound and theatrical shows. But the business side of things, that wasn't quite reflecting this success early on.
This is a really crucial point in understanding the band's history and, frankly, their drive. Despite the growing critical acclaim and increasing fan base, the band found themselves in a really difficult business situation because of their original recording deal with Trident Studios.
Trident again?
Yeah. The sources indicate they were being paid incredibly low wages, essentially living in relative poverty while their music was gaining traction. There's even a specific detail mentioned that John Deacon was reportedly refused money for a deposit on a house.
No way.
Yeah, highlighting their financial constraints despite their musical potential. Trident Studios claimed to have invested a significant amount, £200,000, into Queen and insisted on recouping that investment first. This made separating from them quite challenging and ultimately led to a really acrimonious split.
That sounds incredibly frustrating for a band that's clearly on the rise. How did they navigate that mess?
It was a tough business reality that forced them to make changes. EMI, their record label, got involved and helped the band seek legal counsel. They hired a lawyer named Jim Beach, who would later become their long-term manager.
Right.
The process of getting out of that Trident contract was difficult, resulted in that acrimonious split, which finally happened in August 1975. While they were looking for new management, they apparently considered working with Peter Grant, the formidable manager of Led Zeppelin.
Wow, Peter Grant.
Yeah, and potentially joining Led Zeppelin's own label, Swansong Records, but they ultimately decided against it. They were concerned, perhaps rightly, that they might not receive top priority given the stature of Led Zeppelin and other bands on that label, like Bad Company.
So they chose a different path for management, one that allowed them to focus more on the creative side.
Exactly. They decided to hire John Reid, who was Elton John's manager at the time. And Reid's advice to the band was straightforward, but exactly what they needed to hear. Basically, I'll take care of the business, you make the best record you can.
Perfect.
It allowed Freddie, Brian, Roger, and John to channel all their energy and creativity back into writing and recording music at what was a really critical phase of their career.
And focusing on the music is precisely what led to the album that would just catapult them to global superstardom in 1975.
Absolutely. That album was A Night at the Opera. It wasn't just a successful album, it was a landmark achievement. It cemented their status as a major force in rock music and, finally, allowed them to reap the rewards of all their hard work and unique vision.
And the centerpiece of that album, a song that remains probably one of the most discussed and revered tracks in music history, was Bohemian Rhapsody.
Bohemian Rhapsody is, well, it's a monumental historical piece, isn't it? Both in terms of its composition and its recording. The sources tell us that Freddie Mercury composed the song from various fragments and musical ideas he'd written down over time, some apparently dating back to his days at Ealing Art College.
Wow.
It's famous for its completely unconventional structure, shifting dramatically between these distinct sections. You've got the ballad opening, the guitar solo, that incredible operatic passage, a hard rock section, and then the reflective coda.
The recording process for that operatic section, especially with mid-70s technology, sounds incredibly complex.
It was groundbreaking. The total recording time for A Night at the Opera was about 3 weeks, which seems relatively short now, but get this. One entire week of that was dedicated solely to recording the central vocal part of Bohemian Rhapsody.
A whole week just for that section.
A whole week. To achieve that massive choir-like operatic sound with just 3 voices, Freddie, Brian, and Roger, they used an astonishing 180 vocal overdubs.
180.
180. The sources even provide this vivid detail. The constant multi-tracking and playback literally wore out the original tape master.
Yeah.
That level of dedication, that experimentation in the studio, it just speaks volumes about their commitment to achieving Freddie's incredibly ambitious vision for the song.
But despite the artistic achievement, the sheer length and structure of the song, that presented a significant challenge when it came to releasing it as a single, right?
It certainly did. The standard length for a radio single back then was, what, around 3 minutes? Bohemian Rhapsody clocked in at almost 6 minutes.
Yeah.
EMI, their record company, was understandably hesitant to release it as a single because of its length and complexity. They actually requested that Queen edit the song down, but the band famously refused.
Good for them.
Absolutely. And this is where a historical connection and a crucial piece of personal influence played a really pivotal role.
That brings us to Kenny Everett, the DJ.
Precisely. Kenny Everett was a hugely popular radio DJ at Capital London and also happened to be a close friend and confidant of Freddie Mercury. Freddie gave Everett a pre-release copy of Bohemian Rhapsody, supposedly with the understanding that he wouldn't play the entire song on air, given the label's concerns.
Oh.
But Everett, recognizing the song's genius, did the exact opposite. Over a single weekend, he reportedly played the song no less than 14 times on his show.
14 times.
14 times. This created an immediate and overwhelming public reaction. Capitol's switchboard was apparently flooded with calls from listeners demanding to know when they could buy this incredible song they kept hearing.
So public demand essentially forced EMI's hand.
That's exactly what happened. Faced with this undeniable public enthusiasm and demand, all generated by Everett's repeated airplay, EMI was basically compelled to release Bohemian Rhapsody as a single, completely unedited. And the song went on to achieve unprecedented success. Topped the UK charts for 9 consecutive weeks. It also played a significant role in popularizing the whole concept of the music video. Brian May reflected on the video's creation, noting that Freddie knew exactly what he was doing. It was Freddie's baby. We just helped him bring it to life. They realized, apparently, that they'd look odd trying to mime such a complex song on TV, so it had to be presented in some other way. That video was really innovative for its time and helped convey the song's inherent theatricality.
And the song's impact, it's resonated across generations, hasn't it? Proving its enduring power.
Its long-term impact is almost unparalleled. The sources highlight these incredible statistics. It's the 3rd best-selling single of all time in the UK, holds the record for the best-selling commercial single there. It's the only single in the UK ever to have sold over 1 million copies on 2 separate occasions. And to have been the Christmas #1 single twice. Countless polls, consistently over decades, have voted it the greatest song of all time. And in the digital age, by 2018, it had become the most streamed 20th century song globally, surpassing 1.6 billion streams. It's a true cultural phenomenon, a testament to its unique artistic vision.
So following the monumental success of A Night at the Opera and Bohemian Rhapsody, they quickly released their next album in 1976.
That was A Day at the Races. And yeah, it's often seen as a companion piece or maybe a sequel to A Night at the Opera, a connection reinforced because both albums borrowed their titles from Marx Brothers movies.
Right.
The album cover also featured a variation of the Queen logo designed by Freddie, maintaining that visual link between the two. And there's a delightful anecdote from this period. The band actually got to meet Groucho Marx himself in Los Angeles.
No way.
Yeah, and they performed an a cappella version of their song 39 for him.
That must have been an incredible moment for them, meeting a legend they clearly admired.
Yeah.
How was A Day at the Races produced? Did they stick with the same team?
Actually, no. For this album, they chose to self-produce, working closely with engineer Mike Stone rather than continuing with Roy Thomas Baker, who had co-produced their first 3 albums. A Day at the Races featured another significant hit single, Somebody to Love.
Oh, classic.
Absolutely. And this song is notable for its really strong gospel influence. To achieve that sound of a huge choir, Mercury, May, and Taylor painstakingly multi-tracked their own vocals over and over again.
Wow.
It was a remarkable technical feat that resulted in this incredibly powerful vocal performance. The song reached number 2 in the UK and number 13 in the US. The album also included the enduring hard rock track Tie Your Mother Down, which became a staple of their live shows for years. Commercially, A Day at the Races was another major success, reaching number 1 in both the UK and Japan and number 5 in the US.
So the mid-'70s were marked by just immense professional success. What was happening in Freddie's personal life during this period of rising fame?
Well, the mid-1970s were also a time of significant personal realization and evolution for Freddie. The sources indicate that it was around this time that he became increasingly aware of and began to accept his sexual orientation.
Okay.
And this personal journey led to changes in his most significant relationship at the time. In December 1976, he ended his romantic relationship with Mary Austin. They had been together for about 7 years and had been living together in a house on Victoria Road in London.
But their bond, it remained incredibly strong, didn't it? It continues long after their romantic relationship ended.
Incredibly strong, yeah. After they stopped living together, Freddie moved into a much larger apartment at 12 Stafford Terrace in Kensington. But importantly, he helped Mary find an apartment very close by, apparently just around the corner on Stafford Terrace, so they could remain geographically near each other. They could even see into each other's windows, supposedly. This close friendship was just a constant in his life. He dedicated songs to her, including that poignant ballad, Love of My Life. He later became the godfather to her son. And perhaps the most significant testament to their bond, in his will, he left Mary Austin half of his substantial wealth and his beloved London home, Garden Lodge. Their enduring relationship is just a crucial part of understanding his personal history, his emotional landscape.
Definitely. And alongside these personal developments, his public persona and style were also becoming more defined, more theatrical.
Oh, yeah. Fueled by the glam rock aesthetic of the era and his own artistic background, Freddie's style became increasingly flamboyant and eccentric during the mid-'70s. He continued to wear striking outfits, including those dresses designed by Zandra Rhodes, and embraced visually dramatic looks like long hair, painted fingernails, things like that. Queen's stage shows themselves evolved into these highly theatrical productions. The sources mention that early on, he and Brian May would appear in distinct black and white outfits. Their performances incorporated dramatic elements like throwing roses to the audience, toasting with champagne, and often ending shows with a dramatic performance of God Save the Queen.
And all of this theatricality, it must have contributed to that powerful connection they had with their audience.
Absolutely. That sense of spectacle, combined with the band's undeniable musical talent and, crucially, Freddie's immense energy and charisma as a frontman, it forged this deeply emotional and energetic bond with the audience. Their concerts became these participatory events. Fans weren't just watching, they were swept up in the performance. This connection was a key factor in their rise to become, well, a premier live act.
As they transitioned into the 1980s, Queen continued their evolution musically and expanded their global reach even further.
That's right. Their 1980 album, The Game, marked a really distinct shift in sound and presentation for them, positioning them firmly in the new decade. This album was incredibly successful, particularly in the United States. It featured 2 massive #1 singles over there, Crazy Little Thing Called Love, and Another One Bites the Dust.
And there's a famous story about the release of Another One Bites the Dust, isn't there? Involving another music legend.
There is indeed. According to the sources, Michael Jackson was a big fan of Queen and saw them perform live in Los Angeles around this time.
Wow.
After the show, he apparently strongly advised the band to release Another One Bites the Dust as a single, recognizing its massive crossover potential. They took his advice, and boy did it pay off. The song went on to top the Billboard Hot 100 chart in the U.S. for 3 consecutive weeks in October 1980.
Incredible.
And the Game album itself was a phenomenal success in the U.S. overall. It topped the Billboard 200 album chart for 5 weeks and sold over 4 million copies just in the U.S.
The Game also marked a technical first for the band, something that had been a bit of a running gag on their previous albums.
It did. The Game was the very first Queen album to officially feature a synthesizer.
Finally.
Finally. This was a notable moment because for years, the liner notes on Queen's album sleeves had proudly stated, "No synthesizers."
Yeah, I remember that.
The sources clarify, however, that this note wasn't necessarily some deep philosophical stance against synths themselves, but rather, as their producer Roy Thomas Baker explained, it was meant to assure listeners that the complex, multi-layered guitar sounds on their albums were achieved through Brian May's incredible guitar work and studio techniques, not synthesized effects.
Ah.
So the inclusion of a synthesizer on the Game represented a deliberate, though perhaps slightly humorous, step into new sonic territory for them.
And Freddie even added a new instrument to his live repertoire for one of the hits from this album.
He did. Freddie wrote Crazy Little Thing Called Love, famously apparently, while taking a bath, and played rhythm guitar on the studio recording. So when they performed the song live, he took on rhythm guitar duties. That marked the first time he had ever played guitar in concert.
Wow.
This period also saw them playing 3 sold-out shows at the prestigious Madison Square Garden in New York City in September 1980, a huge milestone for any band. They also released the soundtrack album for the sci-fi film Flash Gordon that same year.
Ah, Flash, Gordon's alive.
Exactly. Their success in the U.S. was recognized at the 1981 American Music Awards, where Another One Bites the Dust won the award for Favorite Pop Rock Single.
So by the early 1980s, Queen had truly solidified their position as one of the biggest stadium rock bands in the world, enjoying just incredible international success.
They were a global touring powerhouse, no doubt. Their music resonated deeply in many parts of the world, and they found particular, really passionate success down in South America. For example, their ballad, Love of My Life, became this massive hit, topping charts in Brazil and Argentina. And during their concerts there, Freddie developed this truly magical moment. He would stop singing the song partway through and just conduct the vast audiences.
No way.
Who would sing the rest of the song back to him, word perfectly, in English. This unique interaction became this incredibly emotional highlight of their South American shows. You can see footage of it. It's quite something.
That must have been just an awe-inspiring experience for both the band and the hundreds of thousands of fans. However, not every international stop was without its challenges, was it?
No. While their success was immense, some international gigs definitely presented difficulties. In October 1981, they played to huge crowds in Mexico, estimates of over 150,000 people attending their 3 sold-out shows.
Huge.
But the sources mention that these concerts were unfortunately marred by significant planning issues, a lack of adequate facilities at the venues, things like that. This led to frustration among some sections of the audience, resulting in projectiles being thrown onto the stage.
Oh, dear.
And Freddie, known for his direct and often unfiltered stage persona, ended the final gig with a memorable, albeit pretty blunt, sign-off. Adios, amigos, you motherfuckers.
Slight chuckle. A very Freddie Mercury moment, to be sure. They also captured a major concert performance on film during this period.
Yes. Their concert in Montreal, Canada in November 1981 was recorded and later released as Queen Rock Montreal. It's considered a really important historical document of their live sound and stage presence right at the height of their early 80s stadium era. It showcases their power and connection with a large audience.
Their next studio album, Hot Space, released in 1982, saw another musical departure, but it didn't quite resonate as strongly with everyone, did it?
No. Hot Space saw the band experimenting much more heavily with a sound that incorporated more soul, funk, and disco influences. This was a noticeable shift from their traditional rock roots, and it apparently created some division within the band itself. The sources indicate that Freddie and John Deacon were pretty enthusiastic about exploring these new sounds, while Brian May and Roger Taylor were perhaps less keen on the overall direction.
Interesting dynamic.
There was also reportedly some tension related to the influence of Paul Prenter, who was Freddie's personal manager at the time. According to the band's producer, Prenter disliked rock music and was apparently dismissive of rock radio stations, which may have contributed to the musical direction and potentially impacted the album's reception in certain markets.
So the album kind of reflected internal creative and maybe managerial tensions.
It appears so. The album definitely confused some of their longtime rock fans, although it still performed reasonably well in the UK, reaching number 4 on the charts. They toured to promote Hot Space, but faced audiences who were, at times, unreceptive to the new material, particularly some of the funk-influenced tracks.
Right.
Freddie, never one to back down, famously retorted to hecklers during a show in Frankfurt, Germany, by saying something like, "If you don't want to listen to it, go home."
Huh. Classic Freddie. And this period marked a significant change in their touring presence in North America, didn't it?
It did. Queen stopped touring North America after the Hot Space tour. Their commercial momentum in the U.S. had started to wane somewhat compared to their massive success pretty much everywhere else in the world. Their final 2 gigs in the United States with Freddie as their lead vocalist were held in Inglewood, California in September 1982. And their very last public performance in North America with Freddie was an appearance on the TV show Saturday Night Live, also in September 1982.
You mentioned earlier that the sources point to a possible societal factor contributing to this shift in the U.S.
Yes. According to one source cited in the material, the decline in Queen's U.S. popularity during this period was partially attributed to homophobia.
Right.
Journalist Peel Gilmore is quoted in Rolling Stone describing how at some shows on their 1980 American tour, there were these deeply unpleasant incidents where fans tossed disposable razor blades on stage.
Oh my God.
Yeah. The interpretation offered is that they didn't like this identity of Mercury, what they perceived as a brazenly gay rock and roll hero, and they wanted him to shed it. Now, this is a stark detail from the sources, and we report it as such, highlighting the challenging societal attitudes of the time and suggesting how they might have intersected with the public perception of the band and Freddie as a frontman in certain markets, despite the band's broad appeal overall. It reflects the era's complexities.
It's a difficult historical reality to acknowledge, certainly. Moving on to 1984, they released the album The Works.
The Works saw Queen returning maybe closer to their rock roots, but still incorporating elements of both rock and pop. The album featured several enduring hits, including Radio Gaga, which became this huge anthem celebrating radio.
Iconic video, too.
Absolutely. Hammer to Fall, a hard-hitting rock track, and the globally popular I Want to Break Free. However, the music video for I Want to Break Free caused significant controversy, particularly in the United States, where it was actually banned by MTV.
Why was that video banned? What was the issue?
Well, the video was essentially a humorous parody of the popular, long-running British soap opera Coronation Street. And it featured all the band members dressed in drag, portraying female characters from the show Housewives, Schoolgirls.
Right, I remember. Freddie with the vacuum cleaner.
Exactly. Roger Taylor is credited with coming up with the idea, reportedly suggesting it as a way for the band to show they didn't take themselves too seriously, could laugh at themselves. Sources mention Freddie himself was initially a bit reluctant to participate in the cross-dressing.
Interesting.
While the video was largely seen as lighthearted satire and was a massive hit in the UK and elsewhere, its depiction of cross-dressing was met with strong disapproval by MTV in the US, leading to the ban. This, coupled with reported issues with their U.S. record label at the time, Capitol Records, contributed to the Works album struggling in the American market. Despite being a huge success elsewhere, it went triple platinum in the U.K. and stayed on the charts for 2 years.
The Works tour also included performances that sparked significant historical and societal controversy, didn't it?
This is another crucial point, really reflecting the intersection of the band's career with global politics. In October 1984, during the Works tour, Queen played 9 sold-out dates in Sun City.
Sun City, South Africa.
Located in the Bantustan of Bophuthatswana, South Africa, yes. This was during the absolute height of apartheid, that system of institutionalized racial segregation and discrimination enforced by the white minority government. At this time, there was a widespread international movement advocating for divestment from, and crucially, a cultural boycott of South Africa to pressure the government to end apartheid. By playing in Sun City, Queen violated both worldwide divestment efforts and a specific United Nations cultural boycott that had been put in place.
How did the band respond to the international outrage and criticism they faced for doing that?
The band defended their decision at the time by stating that the primary purpose was just to play music for their fans, regardless of nationality or political system. They also highlighted that the concerts in Sun City were played before integrated audiences, arguing that this was, in itself, a positive step.
But there were consequences.
Oh, yes, the consequences were significant. The band was fined by the British Musicians Union for breaking the cultural boycott, and they were placed on the United Nations list of blacklisted artists, effectively naming them as having violated the anti-apartheid sanctions. Much later, Roger Taylor expressed regret about the decision, stating in retrospect that he felt it was kind of a mistake. This episode remains a complex and frankly debated part of Queen's history, highlighting the challenges faced by international artists navigating these global political and ethical landscapes during periods of intense conflict.
Despite that controversy surrounding the Sun City shows, 1985 brought what is widely regarded as one of the most iconic and triumphant moments in rock history. Live Aid.
Live Aid, yes. A monumental twin-venue concert organized by Bob Geldof and Midge Ure to raise funds and awareness for the famine in Ethiopia. Queen's performance took place at Wembley Stadium in London on July 13, 1985. And while their set was only about 20 minutes long, it is almost universally considered one of the greatest live performances in the history of rock music. Full stop.
The sources really paint a picture of an almost mythical performance.
They do. The material states that their performance delivered Queen to history and made Freddie Mercury a legend. It's described as the moment that built the myth of insuperable frontman for Freddie. Bob Geldof himself is quoted extensively, emphasizing the power of their set. He said, "Queen were absolutely the best band of the day. It was the perfect stage for Freddie. The whole world."
High praise indeed.
He went even further, declaring, "Freddie Mercury on stage at Live Aid is the summit of rock and roll." The band's energy, their song choices, that incredible medley including bits of Bohemian Rhapsody, Radio Gaga, Hammer to Fall, Crazy Little Thing Called Love, We Will Rock You, We Are the Champions, and Freddie's unbelievable ability to command that enormous Wembley crowd and the global television audience. It was just unparalleled. It was a performance that silenced any doubts about their live prowess and completely cemented their legacy for a whole new generation.
And just before Live Aid, in January 1985, they had already demonstrated their massive live appeal at another historic event, right?
That was the first Rock in Rio festival in Brazil. Queen headlined 2 nights at this massive event in January 1985, playing to approximately 250,000 people on each of those nights.
250,000 people enough.
250,000. At the time, this was an absolute record for concert attendance. It just showcased the sheer scale of their international popularity, particularly in South America. Highlights from these concerts were released on VHS and broadcast on MTV, bringing the experience to a global audience. And the sources specifically note that duet between Freddie and the audience singing Love of My Life as a key emotional moment from those historic shows.
Their final major tour with Freddie as frontman was the Magic Tour in 1986.
The Magic Tour, yeah. Launched to support their album A Kind of Magic, which also served as the soundtrack to the film Highlander.
There could be only one.
Exactly. This tour was another massive undertaking. They played to approximately 1 million spectators across 26 dates throughout Europe. 2 of the most famous concerts from this tour were held back at Wembley Stadium in London, each attended by 70,000 passionate fans. These shows are particularly memorable visually as they're where Freddie wore that instantly recognizable yellow military-style jacket designed by Diana Mosley.
The iconic yellow jacket.
Yeah.
And he ended those shows with a truly regal flourish, didn't he?
He did. Freddie concluded each show on the Magic Tour dressed in a manner absolutely befitting the band's name, like a king, complete with a long fur cloak and a crown, while the band performed God Save the Queen. It was a powerful, theatrical, and somehow fitting closing image for their live concerts. Right. Tragically, though, the very last live performance of Freddie Mercury with Queen took place on August 9, 1986, at Knebworth Park in England, in front of a massive audience of 120,000 spectators. That show marked the end of an era for Queen as a live touring unit with their original frontman.
So after the Magic Tour, Freddie didn't tour with Queen anymore. What musical projects did he pursue in the late 80s?
Well, one really notable project was his collaboration with the renowned Spanish operatic soprano, Montserrat Caballé. Freddie had met her back in 1983 and greatly admired her work. In 1988, they released a collaborative album titled Barcelona.
Barcelona.
Right. This album was this unique blend of pop and opera, a fusion that perhaps wasn't entirely surprising given Freddie's long-standing appreciation for opera, which you could hear traces of even back in Bohemian Rhapsody in the mid-70s.
How was the Barcelona album received? Was it a straightforward success?
Critically, it got mixed reviews. Some critics saw it as an extremely successful experiment, really appreciating the unique blend of genres and voices. Others were, let's say, less convinced, with one apparently calling it the most bizarre CD of the year.
Ouch.
Yeah. But despite the varied critical reception, the album was commercially successful. It reached number 8 on the UK charts and became a hit, particularly in Spain. And the title track, Barcelona, gained significant historical prominence later on.
That song became linked to the 1992 Olympics, didn't it?
Exactly. The song Barcelona was chosen as the official anthem for the 1992 Summer Olympics, held in Barcelona, Spain. Freddie and Montserrat Caballé actually performed the song live together on several occasions before the Olympics, including a performance at the La Nit Festival in October 1988, held in front of the King and Queen of Spain.
Wow.
This specific performance, that La Nit Festival one, turned out to be Freddie Mercury's last live performance ever, a really poignant closing to his public performing career.
That's incredible.
He had originally been scheduled to perform the song live with Caballé at the opening ceremony of the '92 Olympics, but tragically, due to his passing the year before, Caballé sang it accompanied by a screen projection of Freddie's voice and a video montage of the city.
You mentioned his health. The late 80s saw a decline in his health, though it was initially kept very private amidst growing speculation.
That's right. And there's a subtle but significant detail mentioned in the sources regarding a change in his appearance around 1987. Around that time, Mercury stopped following the popular Castro clone fashion, that specific style of mustache, often with short hair. He shaved his mustache and began growing a beard. The sources state that this change in appearance was, at least in part, an attempt to conceal visible signs of Kaposi's sarcoma. Kaposi's sarcoma is a type of cancer often associated with AIDS, and it can cause these visible lesions on the skin. This detail directly links his change in appearance to the early manifestations of his illness before his diagnosis was ever publicly confirmed.
That adds such a powerful and very sad layer to images from his later public appearances. When did he finally address the persistent rumors about his health publicly?
After considerable and increasingly widespread media speculation regarding his health, Freddie Mercury issued a prepared public statement on November 23, 1991. In this statement, he confirmed that he had tested HIV positive and had been diagnosed with AIDS. He explained that he had kept the information private up to that point primarily to protect the privacy of those closest to him, but felt it was now time for his friends and fans around the world to know the truth and, importantly, to join the fight against the disease.
And, tragically, his passing followed very, very quickly after that public confirmation.
Heartbreakingly so. Freddie Mercury died just within 24 hours of releasing that statement on November 24, 1991. The direct cause of death was bronchial pneumonia, which was a severe complication brought on by his AIDS diagnosis. His funeral was held 3 days later on November 27, 1991, in Kensal Green, West London. It was a private ceremony, attended only by close friends and family, and conducted according to the Zoroastrian religious traditions of his Parsi family.
His death, while obviously a global loss, also led to a significant resurgence of interest in Queen's music and several important posthumous releases.
It absolutely did. One of the first things that happened was the re-release of Bohemian Rhapsody as a single shortly after his death. This time, it was released as a double A-side single paired with the song These Are the Days of Our Lives.
Ah, yes.
And the music video for These Are the Days of Our Lives was particularly poignant. It was one of the very last videos filmed with Freddie, and it was deliberately shot in black and white to help conceal the extent of his illness at the time.
And then the film Wayne's World played a huge role in reigniting Queen's popularity, particularly in North America, where it had maybe waned a bit in the 80s.
That's a pivotal moment in their posthumous history, absolutely.
Yeah.
The 1992 comedy film Wayne's World featured that now famous scene where the main characters headbang like crazy to Bohemian Rhapsody in a car.
Instantly iconic.
Totally. This inclusion just thrust the song right back into mainstream popular culture in North America. It resulted in Bohemian Rhapsody re-entering the Billboard Hot 100 chart for the third time, reaching number 2 and staying there for 5 weeks. The scene was so impactful that Queen and their management were reportedly delighted with its inclusion. It helped the song win an MTV award in 1992. New music videos for the song were even created using footage from Wayne's World, further solidifying the connection and really rekindling Queen's popularity in the United States.
There were several other significant posthumous releases as well, weren't there? Compilations and solo stuff.
Yes. The compilation album Classic Queen was released in the U.S. in 1992, riding that wave of the Wayne's World success. It reached number 4 on the Billboard 200 chart, eventually being certified triple platinum in the U.S.
Huge.
Freddie Mercury's solo material was also revisited. The Freddie Mercury album was released in the UK in 1992. It was known as The Great Pretender in the US. It was a collection of remixes of his solo songs. Now, while some hardcore fans apparently criticized the remixes for deviating too much from the originals, it became Mercury's most commercially successful solo album, reaching number 4 in the UK. Another remix compilation, simply titled Remixes, came out in 1993. And the No More Brothers remix of Freddie's solo song Living on My Own from this album hit number 1 in the UK and internationally. It became a massive dance hit.
And then, of course, came the final Queen album featuring Freddie's vocals.
That was Made in Heaven, released in 1995, 4 years after his death. This album was a deeply moving project for the surviving members you can imagine. It contained Freddie's final vocal recordings, which he managed to lay down in sessions shortly before he passed away, knowing his time was limited.
Incredible commitment.
Truly. These include tracks like A Winter's Tale, You Don't Fool Me, and Mother Love. There's a particularly poignant detail about Mother Love. It's reported to be the very last song Freddie recorded vocals for. He finished the penultimate verse, but told the band he didn't feel well enough to complete the final one at that moment, intending to come back later. Sadly, he never did. Brian May ended up recording the final verse himself as a tribute. The album also incorporated unused material from previous sessions and reworked versions of solo songs by the band members. It was largely recorded at the band's studio in Montreux, Switzerland. Made in Heaven became Queen's best-selling album of new material in the UK and sold an estimated 20 million copies worldwide, a testament to the enduring power of Freddie's voice and the band's legacy.
The remaining members also paid tribute to Freddie with a final recorded piece featuring all 3 of them together, didn't they?
Yes, the song No One But You, Only the Good Die Young, released in 1997, was dedicated to Freddie. It marked the last recorded work by the 3 surviving members, Brian May, Roger Taylor, and John Deacon together, before John Deacon retired from music shortly after.
Tributes and honors to Freddie Mercury has continued to emerge over the years, including some quite unexpected and unusual ones.
They really have. A bronze statue of Mercury was unveiled in Montreux, Switzerland, overlooking Lake Geneva, where he spent a lot of his later years. That was on November 25, 1996, the 5th anniversary of his death. Closer to his first home in the UK, there's a plaque at the house in Feltham, where his family settled, unveiled in 2009, and a star dedicated to him in Feltham High Street, also from 2009. He's even had a sort of virtual presence in major global events like the Olympics beyond that planned 1992 performance. A recording of his famous I.O. vocal improvisation during the 1986 Wembley concert was used for a really memorable audience sing-along moment at the closing ceremony of the London 2012 Olympics.
That was amazing. And the naming of animal species after him is particularly unique and, well, fitting for someone who moved across continents.
It's truly remarkable, isn't it? In the 21st century, several newly discovered animal species have been given scientific names in his honor. There's a genus of frogs discovered in India, near where he lived for part of his youth, named Mercurana. In Brazil, a species of damselfly was classified and named Hadaragrion Freddie Mercury. And an isopod, a type of crustacean discovered in the waters off Zanzibar, was fittingly named Cirillana Mercury, specifically to honor the island's most famous musician and singer.
That's incredible.
There's also apparently a yellow rose named in his memory, yellow reportedly being his favorite color. These diverse tributes, they just highlight the wide-ranging and enduring impact of his legacy across different fields, even bleeding into science.
Looking back at the entire trajectory of his life and career, what are the key elements that really define his artistic legacy?
Well, the story strongly reinforces his immense talent across multiple dimensions. He was not only an extraordinary singer, but also a highly successful composer and songwriter, responsible for so many of Queen's biggest and most enduring hits, While the sources don't give a specific vocal range in octaves, they consistently emphasize his power, his range, his skill as a vocalist, describing him as an insuperable frontman, and noting his consistently high ranking in polls of the greatest singers of all time. He himself deeply admired Jimi Hendrix, stating, and this is in Italian, "Ojalá magi o non ce l'hai, nessuno può eguagliarlo," which translates to, "You either have the magic or you don't. Nobody can match him." Shows his high bar for musical genius.
His musical style evolved dramatically over time, too, far beyond their early hard rock roots.
It really did. Queen's sound, guided heavily by Freddie's vision, evolved significantly. Starting from that progressive rock, hard rock, heavy metal bass, they successfully incorporated elements of pop rock, arena rock, operatic passages, rockabilly, soul, funk, you name it, into their music. Key to their distinctive sound was the extensive use of multi-tracking, especially for those incredibly rich vocal harmonies, which were typically sung by Freddie, Brian, and Roger. The sources credit their producers and engineers, people like Roy Thomas Baker and Mike Stone, with helping to develop this sonic experimentation. And of course, you can't forget Brian May's unique equipment.
Special.
The red special guitar, custom-built, designed partially to generate feedback, his use of Vox AC30 amplifiers, and even his distinctive choice of using a sixpence coin as a plectrum, all contributed to Queen's instantly recognizable sound.
And his songwriting success is measured not just in chart hits, but in the lasting cultural significance of songs like Bohemian Rhapsody.
Absolutely. Bohemian Rhapsody is like a historical artifact in itself. It won numerous accolades, including being voted the best British pop single between 1952 and 1977, multiple polls for the best British single ever. Not to mention its induction into the Grammy Hall of Fame and setting those global streaming records we talked about. And beyond that masterpiece, Freddie's songwriting contributed countless other chart-topping and enduring hits to their catalog. Songs like Crazy Little Thing Called Love, Don't Stop Me Now, It's a Hard Life, Killer Queen, Love of My Life, Bicycle Race, Play the Game, Somebody to Love, and of course anthems like We Are the Champions, which has become completely synonymous with sporting victories worldwide.
Visually, he was just as impactful as he was musically, wasn't he?
His visual presentation was absolutely inseparable from Queen's identity. It was inherently theatrical and eccentric right from the start. From the early Zandra Rhodes dresses and the use of makeup, to that iconic yellow military jacket from the Magic Tour, and that final King costume flourish. His fashion choices and powerful stage persona were instrumental to the band's success and recognition. Their music videos were also visually innovative for their time, further showcasing their unique style and helping to define their image for a global audience.
And Queen's legacy has extended far, far beyond the music itself, embedding itself deeply into popular culture across film, television, and theater.
Oh, their music is just ubiquitous in popular culture. They provided the original soundtracks for significant films like Flash Gordon and Highlander, and the theme song Princes of the Universe from Highlander even became the opening theme for the popular TV series adaptation.
Right.
Their songs have been used in countless other films, sometimes performed by the band, sometimes covered by other artists, like Somebody to Love, featuring prominently in both the animated film Happy Feet and the fantasy film Ella Enchanted. The Show Must Go On, that poignant later track, was used memorably in Baz Luhrmann's Moulin Rouge. A Knight's Tale famously featured medieval crowds singing along to We Are the Champions and We Will Rock You, demonstrating the timeless anthemic quality of their music. And, as we discussed, the inclusion of Bohemian Rhapsody in Wayne's World had that direct, tangible impact on their chart performance decades later. Another example is Don't Stop Me Now, which re-entered charts after being used so brilliantly in the horror comedy film Shaun of the Dead.
They've also been woven into the fabric of television shows in so many ways.
You really can find Queen's influence throughout television. Their song, I Was Born to Love You, served as the theme song for a popular Japanese TV drama. Episodes of several shows have been titled after Queen songs, an entire season of the American sitcom. That 70s show was named after Queen songs, including its premiere episode titled, naturally, Bohemian Rhapsody. They've been featured in numerous music documentary series like VH1's I Love the 70s, VH1's Legends, the BBC's 7 Ages of Rock. Their songs have also been memorably performed within the narratives of scripted shows, from Graham Norton's character singing Bohemian Rhapsody in the Irish sitcom Father Ted, to multiple songs being covered by the cast of the musical comedy drama series Glee, including Somebody to Love, Another One Bites the Dust, and of course, Bohemian Rhapsody.
And their music has formed the basis for a major, very long-running theatrical production.
Yes, the musical We Will Rock You. It premiered in London back in 2002 and went on to become the longest-running musical at the city's Dominion Theatre, playing there continuously until 2014. It's also toured extensively around the world. The sources even mention that there has been a ballet adaptation of their music, highlighting the diverse ways their artistic output has been interpreted and performed.
They even made an appearance briefly in the world of video games.
They did. In 1998, they released a computer game titled Queen, the Eye. However, according to the sources, the game received pretty mixed reviews. Critics at the time noted that its graphics were somewhat outdated by the time of its release, and some found the gameplay elements a bit frustrating. So, perhaps not their most successful venture, but an interesting part of their attempt to expand their reach into different media.
And of course, the 2018 biopic Bohemian Rhapsody brought their story and Freddie's life to a whole new generation on the big screen.
The film Bohemian Rhapsody was a major cultural event. It primarily focused on the band's formative years and culminated with that legendary Live Aid performance. The film's production, as you might know, faced notable challenges and delays, including changes in cast, with Rami Malek ultimately taking on the role of Freddie after actors like Sacha Baron Cohen and Ben Whishaw were considered,
Right.
and a change in director, with Dexter Fletcher replacing Bryan Singer during production. Despite receiving mixed reviews from critics, many praised the accurate recreation of the Live Aid performance and Rami Malek's portrayal, but wished the film had maybe explored the more complex aspects of Freddie Mercury's life and identity with greater depth. It was a colossal commercial success. Grossed over $900 million worldwide, making it the highest-grossing musical biopic in history. Rami Malek received widespread acclaim for his performance, winning numerous major awards, the Oscar, Golden Globe, BAFTA, Screen Actors Guild Award for Best Actor, and the film's release also had that direct impact on their legacy, causing Bohemian Rhapsody, the song, to re-enter the Billboard Hot 100 chart for that third time we mentioned, over 40 years after its initial release. Just incredible.
Their sheer commercial success and the number of accolades they've accumulated over the years are just staggering when you lay them out.
Queen is undoubtedly one of the world's best-selling music artists. Estimated record sales range from 250 to 300 million units worldwide. Their success is quantified by their numerous #1 hits and albums, 18 #1 albums, 18 #1 singles, 10 #1 DVDs globally. Their greatest hits album, released in the UK in 1981, holds the distinction of being the best-selling album of all time in the UK and is certified 9x platinum in the United States. They were rightfully inducted into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame in 2001, and they hold this unique distinction among bands. They are the only group where every single member, Freddie Mercury, Brian May, Roger Taylor, and John Deacon, composed more than one chart-topping single. That highlights the extraordinary collective songwriting talent within the band.
That's amazing. And interestingly, they were one of the most bootlegged bands ever, which surprisingly had a kind of positive impact in certain regions.
That's a fascinating detail from the sources, yeah.
Okay.
By 2001, there were reportedly over 12,000 websites dedicated specifically to Queen bootlegs.
12,000.
12,000. The sources suggest that these unofficial recordings, despite being illegal, actually helped contribute to the band's immense popularity, particularly in countries where Western music was censored or restricted, like Iran. And Queen holds another significant historical distinction related to this. Following the release of their greatest hits album in 2004, they became the first Western rock act to be officially accepted and licensed to release music in Iran.
They consistently feature right at the top of polls and lists, ranking the greatest artists and musicians too.
Oh, they are perennially ranked among the giants of popular music. Rolling Stone magazine included Queen at number 52 on their list of the 100 greatest artists of all time. Individually, Freddie Mercury was ranked as the 18th greatest singer, and Brian May as the 26th greatest guitarist on their respective lists. Rolling Stone readers, in a separate poll, voted Freddie Mercury the second greatest frontman in rock history.
Second only to. Need to look that up later.
Yeah. VH1 placed Queen at number 13 on their list of the 100 greatest artists of hard rock and number 17 on their broader list of the 100 greatest artists of all time in 2010. In 2012, readers of GigWise voted Queen the best band of the past 60 years. The sources also reiterate the point that despite their undeniable global stature, their significance and legacy, particularly in the U.S., are sometimes seen as not as fully recognized compared to their immense and sustained popularity across the rest of the world, especially Europe and South America, where they continued to fill stadiums long after their U.S. success peaked in the early 80s.
What has Queen's story been since Freddie's passing back in 1991? Have they continued?
Queen has continued to exist and perform in various iterations, most notably as Queen plus Adam Lambert since 2011, with Adam Lambert handling lead vocals. They've performed at major events like Queen Elizabeth II's Platinum Jubilee in 2022. In 2022, they also released a previously unheard vocal track by Freddie Mercury that was discovered in their archives, which was exciting. It's important to note, though, that bassist John Deacon effectively retired from music in 1997 and hasn't participated in Queen's activities since then. The sources also mention that collaboration between Freddie Mercury and Michael Jackson on a song called There Must Be More to Life Than This. Although recorded during their lifetimes, the version featuring both vocals wasn't officially released until the Queen Forever compilation album in 2014.
So the story of Freddie Mercury and Queen is truly one that spans continents. Major historical upheavals, incredible artistic innovation, navigating the complex business of music, evolving societal attitudes, personal challenges, and these huge global events like Live Aid and the AIDS epidemic.
It really is a story that offers such a compelling lens through which to view modern history. From Freddie's origins shaped by revolution, to the band's response to controversies like apartheid-era boycotts, their pivotal role in a global humanitarian effort like Live Aid, and their members' experience with the devastating impact of the AIDS epidemic. Their music and lives weren't just a reflection of the times, they also at times actively shaped culture and society across decades.
Which brings us to a final thought for you, the listener, to consider. Given how Freddie Mercury's life and Queen's history intersected so profoundly with major global events and societal shifts, from the Zanzibar Revolution and navigating controversies around apartheid and sexuality, to their catalytic role in Live Aid and facing the AIDS epidemic, and how their music continues to resonate across media and generations decades later. What does this story tell us about the enduring power of art to both reflect and perhaps shape history? What specific historical or societal thread from Queen's complex and truly remarkable story resonates most strongly with you?